for Crestview Senior Living, today is Patriots Day, and we're honoring Paul Revere as one of the foremost American patriots. To that end, we're going to be reading Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's poems, The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere, and it will be acted out by some of our residents, so listen carefully. First, can everyone hear me? Okay. Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. On the 18th of April in 75, hardly a man is now alive who remembers that famous day and year. He said to his friend, "If the British march by land or by sea from the town tonight, hang a lantern aloft in the belfry arch of the North Church Tower as a signal light. One if by land and two if by sea, and I on the opposite shore will be ready to ride and spread the alarm through every Middlesex village and farm for the country folk to be up and to arms." Then he said good night, and with a muffled oar silently rowed to the Charleston shore, just as the moon rose over the bay, where swinging wide in her moorings lay the Somerset, British man of war, a phantom ship with each mast and spar across the moon like a prison bar, and a huge black hulk that was magnified by its own reflection in the tide. Meanwhile, his friend, through the alley and street, watches and wanders with eager ears, till in the silence around him he hears the muster of men at the barrack door, the sound of arms, the tramp of feet, and the measuring tread of the grenadiers marching down to their boats on the shore. Then he climbed the tower of the North Church by the wooden stairs with stealthy tread to the belfry chamber overhead, and he startled the pigeons overhead, where he paused to listen and look down a moment on the roofs of the town and the moonlight flowing over all. Suddenly all his thoughts are bent on a shadowy something far away, where the river widens to meet the bay, a line of black that bends and floats on the rising tide, a bridge of boats. Meanwhile, impatient to mount and ride, booted and spurred with a heavy stride, on the opposite shore walked Paul Revere. Now he patted his horse's side, now he gazed at the landscape far and near, and impetuous he stamped the earth and turned and tightened his saddle girth. But mostly he watched with eager search the belfry tower of the old North Church. And lo, as he looks on the belfry's height, a glimmer and then a gleam of light. He springs to the saddle, the bridle he turns, but lingers and gazes till full on his sight a second lamp burns. A hurry of hoofs in the village street, a shape in the moonlight, a bulk in the dark, and beneath from the pebbles, in passing, a spark. Struck out by a steed, fearless and fleet, that was all. And yet through the gloom and the light, the fate of a nation was riding that night. And the spark struck out by the steed in his flight kindled the land into flame with its heat. He has left the village and mounted the steep, and beneath him, tranquil and broad and deep, is the mystic, meeting the ocean's tides. And under the alders that skirt its edge, now soft on the sand, now loud on the ledge, is heard the tramp of his steed as he rides. It is 12 by the village clock when he crossed the bridge to Medford town. He heard the crowing of the cock and the barking of the dog, and he felt the damp of the river fog that rises as the sun goes down. It was 1 by the village clock when he galloped into Lexington. It was 2 by the village clock when he came to the bridge in Concord town. He heard the bleating of the flock and the twitter of birds among the trees. And he felt the breath of the morning breeze blowing over the meadow ground. And one was safe and asleep in his bed, who at the bridge would be the first to fall, who that day would be lying dead, pierced by a British musket ball. You know the rest. In the books you have read, how the British regulars fired and fled, how the farmers gave them ball for ball, for behind each fence and farmyard wall, chasing the redcoats down the lane, then crossing the fields to arrange again, under the trees at the turn of the road, and only pausing to fire and load. So through the night rode Paul Revere, and so through the night went his cry of alarm to every Middlesex village and farm, a cry of defiance and not of fear. A voice in the darkness, a knock at the door, and a word that shall echo forevermore. For born on the night wind of the past, through all our history, to the last, in the hour of darkness and peril and need, the people will waken, and listen to heed the hurrying hoofbeats of that steed and the midnight message of Paul Revere. Thank you. Thank you, folks. Thank you. And in particular, I have a little more to share with you about Paul Revere's Midnight Ride. On April 18, 1775, Paul Revere set out on his now famous ride from Boston, Massachusetts to Concord, Massachusetts. Revere was asked to make the journey by Dr. Joseph Warren of the Sons of Liberty, one of the first formal organizations of patriotic colonists. The purpose was to warn Samuel Adams, John Hancock, and other colonists that the British were preparing to march on Lexington. Revere was taken by boat across the Charles River to Charleston, where he then borrowed a horse from a friend. Revere and a fellow patriot had previously arranged for signals to be given, the lanterns in the tower of the North Church, so Revere would know how the British had begun their attack. This is where the famous phrase, "Won it by land, to it by sea," originated. While in Charleston, Revere and the Sons of Liberty saw that the 2 lanterns had been hung in the tower, indicating the British movement by sea. Revere then left for Lexington. On his way, he stopped at every house to sound the alarm that the British troops would soon be arriving. Sometime around midnight, Revere arrived at the house of Reverend Jonas Clark, where Hancock and Adams were staying, and gave them his message. Soon after Revere's message was delivered, another horseman went on a different route. Revere and this gentleman decided they would continue on to Concord, Massachusetts, where the local militia had stockpiled weapons and other supplies. A third rider joined them. On their way to Concord, the 3 were arrested by a patrol of British soldiers. Prescott and Dawes escaped almost immediately, but Revere was held and questioned at gunpoint. He was released after being taken to Lexington. He then went on to meet the rest of his people, whom he helped escape the coming siege. At 5 a.m., as Revere and his associate removed from the tavern, they saw the approaching British troops and heard the first shot of the battle on Lexington Green. That gunshot of unknown origin is the one known as the shot heard round the world. Many believe Longfellow's account of the Midnight Ride is inaccurate because he portrays Revere as a lone rider alerting the colonists. The poet also fails to mention that Revere was captured by British soldiers before he reached Concord. However, the literary creation of a folk hero named Paul Revere was very inspiring to many, and the poem still reminds people of all ages what it means to be a patriot. Thanks for your attention, folks. Well, refreshments in the bistro. And we have fabulous people you might want to interview. Here's Paul Revere. And here's our fabulous residents. Thank you. Thank you very much.